To the outside world, I am the woman who has it all. At 32, I am the managing partner of Callaway & Associates, the firm my father built from a single rented office in downtown Chicago to one of the most respected boutique law firms in the Midwest. I hold 55% of the equity. My name is on the door. Literally. What very few people know is that I almost walked away from all of it when my father got sick, that I turned down a senior associate position at a white shoe firm in New York to come home and run things while he did chemotherapy. I don't say that for sympathy. I say it so you understand exactly what this place means to me. It is not just a career. It is my father's life's work, and by extension, my own. My husband James joined the firm 3 years after we married. That was my decision. My father liked him, trusted him, and James was a genuinely talented corporate attorney. I gave him the title of founding partner, second only to me. I reorganized 2 entire practice groups around his strengths. I introduced him to every client relationship that mattered. I am not listing these things to make myself sound like a martyr. I am listing them because what came next will not make sense unless you understand the foundation I built for that man. It was a Tuesday morning in October when everything started to unravel. Not with a phone call or a document or even an argument. It started with a glass of Cabernet and a 26-year-old junior associate named Daphne Marsh. I had come into the office early that day for a client breakfast. One of our biggest corporate accounts, a real estate development group out of Oak Park, was signing the final documents on an acquisition we had been working on for 14 months. It was the kind of morning that reminded me why I do this work. There is a particular satisfaction in watching something complicated become clean and final. I was in the lobby at 7:45 speaking with our receptionist about the catering setup when I heard heels on the marble behind me. I turned, and there was Daphne. She was holding a glass of red wine at 7:45 in the morning, which I later learned was left over from a client reception the evening before that she had apparently helped herself to from the refrigerator behind the bar cart. She was talking loudly to one of the first-year paralegals, a young woman named Ashley who looked thoroughly uncomfortable with the conversation she had been pulled into. The thing about this firm, Daphne was saying, loud enough for half the lobby to hear, is that it's about to go through a major transition. James has been talking to some of the other partners. There are people here who think the leadership structure needs to change. He's been managing partner in everything but title for years. Everyone knows it. I stood very still. Ashley's eyes found mine over Daphne's shoulder, and I watched the colour drain from the girl's face. Daphne turned. She saw me, and for exactly 1 second I saw something flicker across her face. Not shame, not embarrassment. Something more calculated. She straightened her shoulders and smiled, and that smile told me everything I needed to know about the kind of person she was. "Good morning," she said pleasantly, as if she had just been discussing the weather. I looked at her for a moment. Then I looked at the wine glass in her hand. Then I looked back at her face. "Is that from the Montrose account reception last night?" I said. She glanced at the glass like she had forgotten it was there. "I just grabbed it from the—" "That's a $200 bottle of client-facing wine that was charged to a disbursement account," I said. "Put it in the sink, please." She opened her mouth. "Now," I said. She put it in the sink. I went back to my office, sat down at my desk and did not move for 4 minutes. My hands were flat on the desk surface. I was thinking about the word transition. I was thinking about the phrase managing partner in everything but title. I was thinking about how specifically James had apparently been sharing his opinions about the firm's leadership with a 26-year-old junior associate. At 8:15, I called James into my office before the client breakfast. He came in straightening his tie, already talking about the acquisition documents, already managing the room the way he always did, filling the air so there was no space for a question he didn't want to answer. I let him finish. Then I said, "What has Daphne Marsh been telling people about you becoming managing partner?" He stopped. He was good. He really was. The pause lasted less than a second. "She's a junior associate, Meredith. She doesn't know what she's talking about." She was in the lobby at 7:45 this morning, telling a paralegal that you've been talking to the other partners about a leadership transition. I have had conversations with people about the direction of the firm. That's my job. Is it? I said. He smiled then, the way he smiled when he thought I was being emotional. Can we do this after the Harrington breakfast? These are my clients, I said. I brought them to this firm in 2019. Go handle the setup. We'll talk tonight. We did not talk that night. James had a dinner, a client dinner, he said, which I did not question, because in 11 years of marriage I had never questioned his client dinners. He got home at 11:30. I was already in bed. He fell asleep in 12 minutes. I lay there in the dark next to him, thinking about the word transition, until 2 in the morning. Over the next 2 weeks, I started paying attention to things I had trained myself not to notice. The way James and Daphne's billing entries overlapped on late evenings, the way she had started dressing differently, less like a junior associate and more like someone who had recently come into money. The fact that she had moved apartments, I knew this because she had updated her emergency contact form through HR, and I was the one who signed off on all HR documents. Her new address was in River North, a building I knew. A nice building. A building where a one-bedroom ran $4,200 a month. Daphne Marsh was a second-year associate making $86,000 a year. I sat with that for a day. Then I called my father's old accountant, a man named Walt, who had kept the firm's books since before I was born and who I trusted more than almost anyone alive. I asked him to quietly pull 3 years of the firm's operating accounts and flag anything that looked like it had been processed through the discretionary expense line without a corresponding client matter number. Walt called me back in 4 days. His voice, when he spoke, had the careful flatness of a man delivering terrible news to someone he has known since she was a child. "Meredith," he said, "you need to sit down." Over a period of 22 months, James had processed $437,000 through a discretionary client entertainment account. The disbursements were structured to stay below the threshold that would have triggered an automatic review, $4,000 to $6,500 at a time, routed through vendor accounts that existed on paper but had no corresponding service records. Some of those disbursements, Walt had traced, had been converted to cash-equivalent transfers. The timing aligned almost perfectly with Daphne Marsh's lease start date, a lease that Walt had found, through channels I will not detail here, listed James as the guarantor. I put the phone down. I walked to the window of my office. Outside, Chicago was doing what Chicago does in early November. Grey sky, wind off the lake, the kind of cold that gets into your teeth. I thought about my father, about the office he rented in 1987, with a loan he paid back in 33 months. I thought about the morning he handed me the firm name on a piece of paper and said, "This is yours now, take care of it." I thought about James sitting at my father's old desk every single morning for 3 years, signing his name to documents with the firm's name on them, eating at my father's clients' expense accounts, sleeping in my father's daughter's bed. I did not cry. I want to be honest about that. People always expect you to cry at the moment of discovery, and I understand why. It makes for a cleaner story. But I did not cry. What I felt was a very specific kind of cold clarity, the same thing I feel in the middle of a difficult deposition when I realize the other side has made a fatal error. Everything slows down. Everything becomes very precise. You start thinking about next steps. I spent 3 days documenting everything before I did anything. I made copies of the financial records. I engaged outside counsel, a litigator I had gone to law school with at Northwestern, a woman named Dr. Petra Vance Holland who specialized in partnership disputes and white-collar matters. I said nothing to James. I was polite at dinner. I asked about his day. I passed him the salad. On the 4th day, I scheduled a partnership meeting. All 6 partners were required to attend. James sat at the far end of the conference table in a chair he had specifically requested. He had always preferred the seat with the lake view. He had a legal pad in front of him and a coffee from the shop downstairs and the easy, settled look of a man who believed he was exactly where he should be. I stood at the head of the table. I said, "Before we start, I need to address a matter that affects the financial integrity of this firm." Petra came in then, right on cue with a banker's box. I watched James's face change. It was like watching a building lose power, floor by floor, section by section, until the whole thing went dark. I walked through everything. The account structures, the disbursement pattern, the vendor entities, the lease guarantee. I did not raise my voice. I did not use a single word that was not precise and documented. I had learned a long time ago that in a room full of lawyers, the most powerful thing you can do is be the calmest person present. When I finished, the room was very quiet. James said, "Meredith, you can speak with Petra," I said. "Or you can speak with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I've already been in contact with both." His attorney was there within the hour. It didn't matter. The records were filed. The referral was made. There is something I want to say about Daphne because I know it is what people are wondering about. She did not know the full extent of what James had done. I had her records pulled, I had her interviewed by outside counsel, and the picture that emerged was of a young woman who had made profoundly stupid choices in her personal life but was not a financial co-conspirator. She had accepted gifts. She had accepted the apartment. She had repeated things James told her without understanding the legal exposure of repeating them. She was terminated, and she will not practice law in the state for a very long time. But she did not go to prison. James did face federal charges. Wire fraud, embezzlement. His attorney negotiated a plea. He will not practice law again either. We divorced in February. He did not contest it. There was nothing left to contest. I want to tell you about the lobby thing because even now, it is the part that stays with me the most. Not the financials, not the depositions, not even signing the divorce papers, which was a Thursday afternoon and took less time than I expected. What stays with me is that Tuesday morning in October, standing in my father's lobby, watching a 26-year-old woman in a good dress hold a glass of stolen wine and tell a paralegal that my husband was going to take my name off the door. There is a particular kind of insult that is designed to make you feel small in a place that is supposed to be yours. I have thought about why that moment affected me as much as it did, and I think the answer is this. She was not talking to me. She did not even know I was there. She was performing for an audience of one frightened paralegal in an empty lobby at 7:45 in the morning, and she was still that confident. That is the thing that told me exactly how far this had gone. People have asked me since whether I was angrier at James or at Daphne. The question always feels like it's trying to get me to pick a villain, and I understand the impulse. It makes the story tidier. But the honest answer is neither, not really. What I felt, once the clarity came, was something closer to grief. Grief for the version of the story I had believed I was living. The marriage, the partnership, the idea that I had chosen well. My father used to say, "You can build something beautiful, and someone can still try to take it. That doesn't make building it a mistake. It makes them a thief." I think about that a lot now. My father is in remission. He comes into the office on Thursdays. He sits in his old chair, which I moved to the conference room when I took over his office, and he drinks terrible coffee from the machine in the break room, and reads the case files I leave on the table for him. He does not practice anymore. His hands shake a little from the medication, but he reads. He always has a note for me by the time I come in from my morning client calls. Last Thursday, his note said, "The Harrington renewal looks good. You negotiated better terms than I would have." I put it in my desk drawer with the others. There is one more thing, and I will keep it brief because it is not the most important part of this story, but it would feel dishonest to leave it out. His name is Owen. He is a litigator at a firm 2 blocks north of ours on Michigan Avenue. We had been opposing counsel on a contract dispute 4 years ago that had gotten genuinely ugly, and I had not especially liked him at the time. He was aggressive in depositions in a way that I found more theatrical than strategic, and he had once made a remark about my negotiating style that I found condescending in a way that I still remember specifically. He sent flowers after the news broke. That is not unusual. Professional courtesy, bar association circles are small in Chicago. But the card said, "You handled that with more class than most people handle anything. I always knew you were formidable. I never said so, and I should have." I wrote back a 3-sentence thank you note. 2 months later, we had coffee. 3 months after that, we had dinner. I am not going to wrap this up with a ribbon. I don't know where that goes. I don't need to know yet. What I know is that I wake up every morning in a house I own outright. I drive to a firm with my name on the door, and I sit at a desk that faces the lake. My father leaves notes on Thursdays. The work is mine. That is enough. For right now, that is more than enough. The thing I keep coming back to is the wine glass, not the $437,000, not the lease guarantee in River North with James's name on it. The wine glass at 7:45 in the morning, held by a woman who had no idea she was standing in the lobby of someone else's life's work, announcing its end like it was already settled. I think about what it takes to get to that point. The point where you believe something belongs to you before you've earned a single day of it. Daphne didn't build anything. She didn't sit with a dying man's files trying to hold a firm together. She didn't turn down New York. She just decided, based on what a man had whispered to her in private, that the thing he was promising her was actually his to give. That is a particular kind of failure of character. Not cruelty exactly, but something quieter and maybe more dangerous. The complete absence of the question, "Did I earn this?" James knew the answer to that question, and he chose not to ask it anyway. That's the part that took me the longest to make peace with. He was not incompetent. He was not unsuccessful. He was, genuinely, a talented attorney. But somewhere along the way, he decided that talent was the same thing as entitlement, that proximity to something built by someone else was the same as ownership, and so he started taking, carefully, structurally, in amounts calibrated not to be noticed. That is not a spontaneous failure. That is a choice made over and over across 22 months. Every disbursement was a decision. Every transfer was a decision. He made those decisions in the same building when my father's name was still on the wall. What I learned, what I am still learning, is that integrity is not a dramatic thing. It does not announce itself. It is just the accumulation of small, unwitnessed decisions made when no one is checking the account. Walt had been checking those books for 30 years because my father believed that honest accounting was the foundation of honest practice. That belief, boring and unglamorous as it sounds, is what eventually caught everything. Character is mostly infrastructure. You build it quietly, or you don't build it at all. The intelligence piece is harder to talk about, because I spent a long time after this feeling genuinely stupid. How did I not see it? I am a lawyer. I read contracts for a living, but I think what I actually failed at was not intelligence in the technical sense. It was the discipline to apply that same scrutiny to the people I loved. I had built careful systems around everything except the person sleeping next to me. That is a lesson I will not repeat. And the last thing, the thing my father said, which I keep in my desk drawer now alongside his Thursday notes, is that resilience is not about recovering quickly. It is about deciding that what was taken from you does not define what you build next. James took money. He took years. He took a version of my marriage that I had believed in. But he could not take the firm, because the firm was never really his to take. It had my name on it. It had my father's name on it before that. Some things belong to the people who built them, regardless of who tries to sign their name across the door. I wake up every morning now and drive to a building on Michigan Avenue and sit at a desk that faces the lake. My father leaves notes on Thursdays. The work is mine. That did not happen despite everything. It happened because of everything, because I was the kind of person who, when the floor gave out, went back to the foundation and found it still solid. That is the only thing worth building toward in the end, a foundation that holds.